Well, that's not the case in America. Well, in America, we're not getting that headline. Instead, you have to put a few headlines together to come to exactly that same conclusion. Like this. Take a look at the headlines we're reading this week. What we're reading is that the U.S. hit its highest single day of coronavirus cases at 36,358, breaking the April record. So we have more cases than ever. Arizona, Florida, California, and Nevada report record high single-day increases in coronavirus cases. We're going crazy over this. We're reinstating mask laws. We're absolutely out of our minds. Governor Abbott in Texas is under siege. You're gonna get us all killed. Many of these reports are saying that one of the highest growing groups of infections is in young adults. Young people in the U.S. South and West are increasingly getting coronavirus. Now, I want to point something out here, folks. They've done a bait and switch on you, right? They've done a bait and switch. We talked about deadly pandemic, the pandemic of the century, and deadly, and the death rate, and the death numbers. Well, they just switched out that word death numbers and replaced it with infection numbers or cases. What is a case? Well, a case is someone that goes to a pop-up clinic and says, yeah, test my blood. Oh, my God, I have it? That's weird. I don't even have any symptoms. Okay, well, I guess I'll stay at home for a little while. I mean, that's what's really going on, right? Essentially, what's happening is the highest number of people in the history of the pandemic now in America have now tested positive for the sniffles. That's what's going on. And yet, that's not what your mainstream media is telling you. Now, you got your president of the United States trying to tell you, hey, folks, we are testing more people. This is why we're getting more cases. You would think that would logically go together, but nobody seems to care. What they should really care about is this headline. The headline that media ignores the fact that 90% of coronavirus death collapse in country. We are 90%, we've dropped down in our death rate. 90% lower death rate than we were at just a few short weeks ago. You see, folks, look at this. Here's the graph. It is going, we've been reporting this to you. This isn't brand new news to you people watching the High Wire, but death is crashing. That's all that actually matters. Now, remember, when you're looking at that, maybe the virus is less deadly, or maybe we're just actually not venting people anymore and killing them at a rate of 9 out of 10. Maybe that could have something to do with it. I don't know. It's just a theory, since we do know the NIH came out and said, you know what, as it turns out, the vents weren't such a good idea, killing lots of people. So maybe doctors are trying something like oxygen instead of killing them with vents. That could contribute to it. And another thing I want to point out is we look in Texas, and I'm watching the news. They're saying, oh, my God, we're on the verge of a shortage of beds. But when you look at the shortage of beds, what they're saying is a shortage of beds in the ICU. Why are we still treating this as though it's an ICU incident when it has a death rate of 0.26% amongst the very, very unhealthy, pharmaceutical-dependent people among us? For the rest of us, this is the sniffles. Maybe they can use a regular bed where you seem to have thousands of those. None of this makes any sense. None of this reporting is getting us where we need to be. Because the truth is, more and more headlines are starting to back away from the idea that we're going to have a successful vaccine. They're starting to really hedge their bets. You got guys like Paul Offit, who we pointed out, is saying, we better slow this down. We need this thing to be tested for a couple of years. And by the way, let me remind you that MERS and SARS and the other coronaviruses, they didn't last more than 2 years. And they did probably what we're seeing this one do. They get less and less virulent, and they just disappear. Well, we want them to disappear as quickly as we can. And obviously, the vaccine will not be the fastest way to do that, because if it's going to be tested for safety, it needs to be tested for at least 2 or 3 years. And now they're saying we don't even know if the infection, the effectiveness will last more than a year. It could be a lot like a flu shot where it's only 10% effective. You see, these are all the problems. And are we going to really make public policy over a vaccine that, number one, doesn't exist, may never come, may not actually be effective enough or last long enough to do anything for anybody? Meanwhile, every day, folks, we are destroying our economy. We are getting dangerously close to what my understanding is a very, very bad number for America. If we hit 50 million unemployed in this country. It's game over. We're over the fulcrum point. You can't get that back. Meanwhile, I've told you, China is ramping up. China is back in business. China is manufacturing. Where are our manufacturing jobs going to go? What is going to happen in the United States of America? While you think you're a hero in your mask, locked in your basement, and you want to celebrate Andrew Cuomo essentially killing people in nursing homes, you may really want to ask yourself, a 0.26% death rate? I should be afraid of that and take on the greatest depression this generation and everyone alive has ever seen in the United States of America. You ready for that? Is that where we're going? Now, all of this took on a really dynamic perspective for me just earlier this week. If you haven't noticed, we are getting so much information. This show, I'm going to try to keep it to 2 hours. There's so much to do. I need more staff. I need your help. But we're starting to put out special reports. Some things we just couldn't fit in last week's show and doesn't seem to fit what we're talking about here. Of course, I'm talking about my interview with Mark Blaxall and his brilliant paper, which came out and was discussing, amongst many things, the data coming out, the drop in infant deaths, the drop